Hey everybody, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast with Dr. Sam Rhee and myself, Coach David Syvertsen. This podcast is aimed at helping anyone and everyone looking to enhance their healthy lifestyle through fitness, nutrition, and most importantly, mindset. All right, welcome back to the Herd Fit Podcast. I am Coach David Syvertsen here with my just returned from vacation co-host, Dr. Coach Sam Rhee, who actually within the past hour just completed Karen 150 wall balls by himself 2 days after he got back from vacation. Sam, how are you?
I feel like doo-doo.
You've had better days?
Yeah, but I have a million excuses, but all I can say is I better work on my wall balls now.
So we have a very special guest here today. We are being graced by Dr. Jonathan Hartman, a friend of mine, someone who has given me and continues to give me a ton of treatment and guidance with everything, all-encompassing health, physical issues that I've had over the years. But more importantly, he is a business owner, and he is the founder, and I guess we call you the CEO of this as well, right? You're just everything, of the Hartman Center for Functional Neurology, and we're going to get into his business throughout this episode. But John, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is special, so
yeah,
looking forward to it. Thanks.
You know, John is obviously talking to people all day, every day. He has he's been treating out of his house for a couple of years now, and I'm really kind of happy for him that he's going to be working in a space in the area. We'll keep that on the DL for now. Am I allowed to talk about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hartman is going to have an office in Midland Park, New Jersey, 1.4 miles from CrossFit Bison. Sometime this fall. He just signed a contract for the place that he purchased, and I could not be happier for him because I know more than most what he's been going through over the past few years to try and get here. And if you want to talk about someone that is just relentlessly pursuing excellence and bettering himself so that he can better you, this is the guy. So, John, let's reflect a little bit on some of your story, your history. This is not going to be what Sam calls a CrossFit start story. I want to know. I know some of the details, but I'm kind of really interested just to hear you talk about where did this journey begin? You know, you really dedicating your entire life to helping other people. Where did all this start?
I was 14. If we're going to go way back when this first happened, I was 14 years old. I was power cleaning for football, and you know that you're good. Yeah, sorry. You're taught how to train. Your technique is just from whoever is in the grade above you, right? Grip and rip, you're pulling the bar as fast as you can.
Yep, remember those days.
And, yeah. So freshman year, a whopping 95 pounds on a power clean and snap and blew my back out. Oof. And then that was kind of it. So I had a pretty bad extrusion at L4, L5, L5, S1 in the lumbar spine.
Okay.
Couldn't walk for about 3 weeks. I was supposed to have, I ended up going to a surgeon because I was supposed to have fusion from L4 to S1. So like a 2-3 segmental fusion in the lumbar spine. Mm-hmm. And my coach sent me to a chiropractor. He's like, go see my guy in Haworth. I'm like, I don't even know how to pronounce the word chiropractor. I'd never even heard that word. My parents literally carried me in. Wow. I'm not easy to be carried. And my mom and dad carried me in. I went every day for 3 months, and that changed my life. So I went from sleeping on the floor, not standing, to at the end of that treatment, I could ride my bike from where I lived in Oradell to Haworth and back. And I was able to continue to play football throughout high school, throughout college. I got to play rugby when I went to grad school, and I knew since I was 14 I was going to be in the business of changing people's lives from that point on. Because when I saw what that guy did with just his hands, his mind, and his passion for helping people non-surgically, mm-hmm. I knew I wanted to go down that path. And then, it took me down this rabbit hole into neurology and brain injuries and concussions because, getting blessed to get to play football came with some other issues, as I'm sure we'll talk about later. But I think that's where everything really started.
So you were a pretty high-level high school football player. I'll say it. You don't have to. And you went on to play at Muhlenberg College. Yeah. You were a tight end?
Tight end, D end, yeah.
Tight end, T end, and just a big, strong physical guy. Did you have lingering back issues throughout high school, or was it really that guy really just clicked it and everything stayed together?
I was pretty good, but when you're that young, cartilage, tendon, everything's so healthy, and you're not really aware of like how much technique and form impacts how you feel, because it might not be in the moment then. You know, I have this vivid memory of like when we go, you know, when you go to camp and you have that like 225 squat test of failure, or you have all your max effort lifts going into camp to figure out where you are in your depth chart. And, you know, you got the power clean, split jerk, back squat, bench press, all these numbers. And I just vividly remember on back squat, you know, we were still taught at the time, like knees can't go in front of the toes on a back squat. And I remember I was squatting 475 thinking to myself, like, all I'm doing is a good morning right now.
Right.
And I'm just praying to everything holy, like spine, don't shatter. And thinking like, this can't be right. But this is how we were taught. And it wasn't like, at the time, that was the best everyone knew at the time. And I can't fault anyone for that. But then, you know, how like interest compounds on a loan over time, you don't realize how much the effects of that style of training impacts you, you know, 10, 15 years down the road. And then, you know, here goes one knee surgery, here goes a second knee surgery. And then, you know, now your goals change just to stay fit and healthy. And, you know, I could say that those character building opportunities kind of shaped who I am today. You know, I had a few bad concussions throughout sports as well. And, you know, they just kind of shaped my life's work.
Yeah.
You know,
So now you go to college and you graduate with what degree before you go to get your master's?
In college, I was a double major in neuroscience and biology. I had a feeling I was either going to go to medical school or I was going to go to chiropractic school or something. And, I was interning, was actually shadowing or interning with a chiropractor my junior and senior year. And her name was Robin, and she kind of said, this is the school you got to go to. I applied, got in, met a couple guys that played football in college as well that joined the rugby team. It was like our, you know, club sport there, just a bunch of, you know, washed up athletes that still needed like a stress reliever from studying, you know, 80 hours a week. And, you know, so we got to play rugby there. And I ended up going from neuroscience and biology in college to chiropractic school. And then, you know, you get into your patient caseload, and then you're so excited, and then you're wondering, like, everyone starts coming in and everything's good. And then they're like, oh yeah, I've got this lower back issue. But you know what? I get dizzy when I turn my head to the right. I've had 4 concussions and 3 autoimmune diseases. And you're like, okay, lay on your stomach. Let's get started.
Yeah.
And then you think to yourself, like, how am I going to help this person? And that is where I started to feel really, school prepared me for a lot. And then my patients taught me I really have to open up my lens of how I want to view people, because, you know, Sam as well, I'm sure you've seen that, you know, patients can come in for one thing, and if you can't help them address or get them the support they need for B, C, and D, even though they're coming to you for A, it's really going to impact your outcomes. And with my own, I've had some pretty nasty concussions, and going into neurology, functional neurology, which is really this aspect of healthcare where you try to create rehabilitative programs for some type of neurological condition. That could be concussions and brain injuries. That could be vertigo and dizziness. That can be Parkinson's and MS. How can you try to support that person's physiology in a way so that person can thrive and live a better life?
So yeah, what I'm getting out of this, just listening to you talk about this, is I have to play this game. I already know, you know, kind of what you've been doing over the past 10 years. When you first walked into CrossFit Bison, wanted to teach us about Bulgarian split squats, you know, that you have never stopped trying to further yourself education-wise.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met anyone like you in that regard. I mean, I'm looking at your name, Dr. Jonathan Hartman, DC, DACNB, DACRB, FABBIR, FACFN, FABVR, all those big acronyms next to your name. And I'm like, Dave Syvertsen, level 2 CrossFit coach.
It's just alphabet. It's alphabet soup.
But
yeah.
But I bring that up, and I don't want to go into each what those all mean. But one thing that you're always studying for something. You're always trying to pass these board exams that are borderline impossible. You're one of 39 people that passed a board that worldwide for the neuroscience, right?
Back in 2013, whatever that was.
Like that, there are things that you're doing educationally, and just hearing you talk about, hey, me helping someone out with chiropractic care is a great thing. But it wasn't enough for you because you know there was more on the plate that you could help out with, but you had to go and learn. So you really applied yourself to do that. And I think we could all take that as an example and something to kind of look up to, that as established as you are and as good as you were at being a chiropractor, there is always another level. Like, you never got complacent with what you had going on with your career.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm still going to bring that back to CrossFit though, because if it wasn't for having like this type of community and something like, I don't have the affordability at this chapter of my life to compete at the way I did when I was in college or even in my 20s, like getting to train as hard as I want. Like, you know, my goals are a little different right now. With the company, I'm a new dad. There's things that I necessarily can't do in CrossFit, but I am going to be relentless in my competition for my career path. And I think that I can take what I have learned from Bison and just there's always something you can do to train in CrossFit, right? There's
absolutely.
A shitload of accessories.
Yeah, you're okay with that.
There's a boatload of accessory work that you can do.
We dropped the
a day in, day out. You can constantly be bettering yourself in how you train. And, I am happy to be really good. I'm in a great place now with how my body feels. And I'm going to take that competitiveness and apply it towards my career path and my obligation to serve and my obligation to make whoever steps into my office overall better in somehow, shape, or form. So,
when I listen to you, John, and I've known you and I've been your patient as well in the past, the one thing that that strikes me is that you are constantly pushing for adaptation. So plasticity, like the body adapts, the brain adapts, but you have to push it in order to do that, right? We know that better than anyone, I think, in CrossFit. If you keep pushing the body, it will respond if you do it appropriately, properly, the right way. And so where we think the brain or neurologic issues are static or set, they're not. The brain responds just like any other part of the body. It's plastic. You change it, you push it, you adapt it, it gets better. You can make progress. Just like if you have a shoulder injury and you have problems with it, you can push it, you can adapt it, you can make it better. And everything that I've seen you do, all of the treatments, all of your thinking is, how do I put this situation into a situation where I can push, make it adapt, make it grow, make it better, improve it, whether it's a patient's injury or your own injuries or any other situation. And I think for clinicians, it's that knowing that you can put the person in a situation to make them better, but you have to have that knowledge of how to do it. Like you said, otherwise you're just making them do 475-pound back squats and hurting them. So it's that knowledge, like, okay, we're going to do it this way. We're going to try this technique. We're going to do this modality. We're going to do this approach in order to make you better. And you may not even believe you can. Like, I know most people who are starting with an injury or, just starting in CrossFit, they can't believe where they might end up. But it takes someone who has that kind of knowledge and the experience, and also the personal experience. I would say, that's what makes you different than a lot of clinicians, is you've experienced a lot of this firsthand. And as you know, and I know, you only really understand some aspects of certain issues if you personally have experienced it. I'm not saying you should go out there and experience every injury, but the fact that you do have that personal knowledge, and I've talked to you about it. I've listened to you, before and after your most recent was it quad tendon surgery?
When I ruptured my quad.
Yeah, and the blood flow restriction protocols and all, and listening to you talk about that, like you treat yourself the same way you would treat any other patient.
Yeah, I'll be the science experiment, and
I love that. Like you're not like, okay, I'm going to do this for myself, and then I'm going to do this for like something different for other people. Like you would do for others exactly what you would do for yourself, and to me that's the mark of someone who really cares.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. No, I try to act as the guide to whoever I'm going to get the opportunity to serve. And then as you've mentioned, that concept of neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to adapt and change to the demands imposed on it for better or for worse, right? You can eat pizza, ice cream, bagels, and your body's going to adapt because it's going to get big and bigger, right? But that pancreas is going to do its job, and it's going to kind of shunt glucose into those adipocytes, and your body will adapt. Or said a different way, you can train, you can get stronger, you can change that brain, you can turn that body into a fat burning machine if you give it what it needs. And for myself like for example, when I ruptured my quad, like that was one of the biggest, like huge slice of humble pie, because I had that was a big eye opener for me, both physically, clinically, emotionally. That was one of the worst injuries I've ever come
Tell me what happened there.
I was backpacking out in a half dome out west, and we were coming down from like a 6-7 day trip. And the last mile coming out of the park is like a 3,700 foot descent over like 3/4 of a mile, like a mile stretch. And, we were already hitting like 60 something miles at that point. And I knew I could feel my heartbeat in my knee coming down from that trip. And I remember sleeping in my tent thinking like, bud, like something's not good. And I knew going into that trip that I had a partial tear because I've been keeping an eye on it, but that trip broke me. And when I came back, I got a cell signal. I called my surgeon. I booked myself for surgery like 2 days later.
How long ago was this?
That was in 2019.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Not that long ago.
Yeah, September 2019. And then I was in a cast for 2-3 months, something like that.
You were banged up. That was the most I've ever seen you banged up.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
And then, I got out of my cast, and then I was on the couch just kind of feeling sorry for myself with this, leg that looks like my wrist.
Yeah, I remember seeing it actually.
Oh, it was disgusting.
It was spindly.
And then that's when Alex Smith, quarterback for the 49ers, he had that. There was an episode, I think they did like a E60 episode on him.
Yep.
And he had that compound fracture in his tib fib.
Yeah.
I forget who they were playing at the time, but he had necrotizing fasciitis, so he had gangrene. And he had some surgical complications once they closed him back up. And for the necrotizing fasciitis, that's gangrene. And they needed to do a debridement down there. And they took all of his dorsiflexors, I think all of his peroneal muscles as well. So he had drop foot. And then while he was under, I believe, just going from memory, that his wife, I think, had written off on or gotten consent to amputate his leg. I don't know if it was above the knee or below the knee. And Alex said, not today, buddy.
Yeah.
And
then playing in the NFL again.
Yeah. So he was one of the first civilians ever. He had a letter signed by the Secretary of Defense, and he had his therapy approved at the Military Research Hospital. And I'll never forget that, because that was a turning point in my life. And then that's when I got into BFR, blood flow restriction therapy.
I remember you talking about it.
And I mean, you guys both know as well, like it changed my life, and that's just one modality of like several, but to get to see how that has helped build, cross-sectional diameter of muscle, but then now they're showing that this might have some applications to like tendon and ligament resiliency. And well, to your point of what you're saying about the brain's ability to adapt and change, if you can use a modality like that, let's say you can use CrossFit, or you can use a therapeutic in someone rehabilitation-wise. If CrossFit's going to make you stronger, muscle's going to get bigger, you're going to get adaptations to joint and tendon resiliency, there's a central consequence of that. Well, how does the brain, I just spoiled it, but how does the body get stronger and adapt to Fran, to a sub 6 minute mile, right? You're going to adapt physiologically, and there's a central consequence to that. The brain's ability to adapt, to have a growth hormone response, to improve your physiological fitness is the definition of neuroplasticity. And now you can take that into the chiropractic neurology world and say, okay, this person had an acoustic neuroma blasted with radiation. So now half of their vestibular system is a little banged up. Well, let's use the concepts of neuroplasticity to try to improve what's left, try to improve their central brain function, and then there's a downstream consequence of improving their stability. So that's, I guess, a long rant, and I apologize for that, but that's kind of where I've learned from CrossFit's ability to adapt and change to be a better, healthier, more rounded athlete to my patients. I look at all of my patients is that you're some level of an athlete. You might not realize it or want to call yourself an athlete, but we're going to go into this treatment program as athletes and we're going to come out better. And that's the approach that has at least worked for me with trying to serve my patient base.
The difference, I would say, or let me ask you this with your patients. So we know CrossFit isn't always easy. In fact, a lot of it is not easy at all. It's tough, and it's not for everybody. A lot of modalities and treatments you do are not that easy. Blood flow restriction is very painful.
Yeah.
And so how do you get buy-in from your patients in terms of, hey, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be fun. This is going to be hard. This might be painful. This might take a long time. How do you bring them along in your practice in terms of getting buy-in for some of these types of treatments that you know will work, but maybe they might not want to do it?
Yeah. So I think understanding their goals and where they're looking to go, and me serving as their guide and helping them get to the end result, right? If they want to get to point B and they'll do whatever it takes, we're going to interview you and see how badly you want to get there and see how hard it takes. For me, for example, I don't care how hard or how painful it is, because there's an adaptation to that pain threshold where it's not as in the initial. So you scale them appropriately. You don't have to start off on 0 to hero and break someone on day one. It's not appropriate, pretty dangerous. So you have a scalable model of increasing the perceived intensity and exertion of the stimulus. So it doesn't have to start off at, like with blood flow restriction, for example, that's, you take someone's blood pressure on a pneumatic cuff, it's 80% of what that limb occlusion pressure is. So LOP or limb occlusion is like once the blood pressure gets cut off, you find a reference point that you would train at. And maybe you start at 40%. Oh, you know what? It was uncomfortable, but, I've done 150 wall balls and that was really uncomfortable. So, this isn't so bad. I've trained before. I know what pain feels like. That didn't suck that bad. Great. Tomorrow's going to be awful. So there's scalable approaches that you can take to people on that. And then for me, my goal, I wanted to be able to pick my daughter up without putting my hands on the floor. So when my daughter was born and I'm looking at my leg and I'm seeing, man, her leg might look bigger than mine, and I'm thinking like, all right, if I had to hold my daughter and God forbid I broke my arm and I'm holding her here and I got to get out of a burning building, can I get up from the ground with no hands? And in 2019, I could not do that. And 2019, I had to hold on to the handicap railings to get off the toilet. And, I'm sure people have had, far worse traumas than me, but for that was awful for me. And what was worse was that if I couldn't be a good husband, if I couldn't be a good dad, that was worse for me than what that level of pain would feel like. Because that's just, it's temporary. It's 6 minutes of some uncomfortable stuff to deal with, but, not being able to be an athlete again or, being a good husband or a good dad, that's my drive. That's my why. And to understand that for patients, to understand, what's your why? Why do you want to do this? And then you couple that with, it doesn't have to be painful, like my brain patients as well. Like we even do BFR, like some of my Parkinson's, my MS, my stroke patients, we still do that because now there's research supporting that, if CrossFit can help improve someone's physiological adaptations and they can get stronger. Now, like BFR, for example, they're showing how you've heard of like stem cells, vascular endothelial growth factor, insulin-like growth factor. There's all these like chemical mediators that get excreted into the bloodstream from the brain's adaptation to that say, hey, we got to improve. We're going to send out all the contractors into the bloodstream to help repair the damaged tissue. And blood flow restriction is a workaround to trick the body into a really stressful stimulus, but you didn't compromise the tissue. You just starved it of oxygen, trained in a hypoxic state, give it the perception that it was a really intense workout. So then you have that central adaptation. And now they're seeing that promotes neuroplastic changes, which is great for patients who are suffering from neurological conditions as well. So interviewing the patient, finding out their why, and then having a scalable approach to their level of uncomfortable, I think has been helpful for me with getting them to buy in.
So when you treat patients, right, one thing that I've gone through, and I've always pushed people towards in your direction, especially if they are willing to sit and listen and look at it from a different lens, right? Like, let's say someone hurts their back, hurts their knee, hurts the shoulder. In a lot of cases, especially with CrossFitters, they want to get back in the gym ASAP and work out. So they'll go to Hartman and be like, yeah, like we talked for 40 minutes. Like, why can't you just make my shoulder better? Why can't you come in and just dig your thumb in and like do what you guys are supposed to do and like get me moving? And, I always tell people I want to challenge you because Hartman really looks at you from not just a shoulder issue. I mean, I remember when Elise, we brought her to you to fix her wrist. We talked about her thoracic rotation and shoulders for a half hour.
Yeah.
To fix her wrist, right? And you have to go in to explain a little bit about why you treat people like that, right? You just gave us your why you want to get your knee better. All right, be a better father, be a better husband, get out of a burning building if you need to, without, get up without using your hands. What is your why behind the way you treat people and how much time you do spend talking and listening before you get on the table and dig in?
So, with regards to patient outcomes and understanding what is the fastest way you can get someone better, there's plenty of literature to support that pain neuroscience education is half the battle, literally half the battle.
Right.
And if I can change the directory of someone's care by spending that extra half hour to make them understand the mechanism and the why as to what's happening, and I just save 50% of my workload.
That's true.
I can't, that is as efficient as I can make it. And to make them understand why the wrist, in Elise's case, why that's happening, helps with their buy-in so that now they know, okay, I understand why he's working on my hip and my thoracic spine because I can't get into a front rack position because I'm overloading my symptom, which in her case was her wrist. Mm-hmm. But there was all these other issues that just hadn't hit a symptom threshold of being, symptomatic.
Right.
So you have all these other ailments, but you're just not using pain. I don't know where I got this from, but pain, it's an acronym. Pay attention inside now. So it's usually like the last indicator of health, and I don't like to use that as a barometer for how healthy a tissue is. Just because there's no pain there doesn't mean there's not some type of structural compromise. And for Elise, we were so hyper-focused initially on the wrist that we had to dial that back a little bit and say, hold on a second, here's your symptom, that's not what your cause is. So let's go on a rabbit hole right now to try and find that. And for her, getting her to sit a little bit more upright in the front rack in the squat position and getting her thoracic spine and her elbow and shoulders into a better front rack position for her dissipated load away from the wrist. So, she needed some triage care to the wrist because the joint tissue was a bit compromised initially, but if you can have the redistribution of load away from the symptomatic joint, that's what makes sense to me in my head, that how I would go about trying to treat that.
And that's the best way to do this, to make sure an issue like that does not come back. But the initial buy-in from the client, from the patient, needs to be, I need to think deeper than just where my pain is right now.
Yeah.
I think that you do a really good job of that. I mean, I just watched you talk to my father about his neck issue, and it was, Hartman was, more than gracious enough to go him over an hour of time. And we talked about his career, his diabetes, his diet, and we're going to get into that in our next episode about inflammation and what really causes it and what you should do with it. But let's talk about the two books that you have recently read. We'll just sum them up, maybe 5 to 10 minutes each. About this. This is what Hartman is to me, right? Is he has a book called Breath: The New Science of a Lost Art, and then Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. And to me, not the coolest thing in the world to read. All right. But if he told me to read these or sent me excerpts, I would read them because I know where he's coming from, and he knows what my competitive goals are with CrossFit, what my fitness goals are, and he's going to look at it from a lens of you struggle with X, Y, and Z because your A, B, and C are off. You know, you're trying to fix your pistols by improving your dorsiflexion, your ankle, and making your quad more flexible. He goes, but your sleep, A, B, and C, the basic lifestyles that you are not doing a good job of, could probably be the reason why you can't make progress in this one department, right? And I'm using myself as an example, and this can go down so many different lanes. Let's talk about why, let's talk about these books in general, but also why you go down this path when you are treating someone. Because I bet that these books that you read that have made an impact on you, you are going to reference them on so many different levels with so many different people that have so many different kinds of problems. But they do come back to how you breathe and how you sleep. Let's talk about the breathing one first. The Unleashing Your Full Potential, Unveiling the Science Behind Breath, the New Science of a Lost Art.
Where's Adam Ramsden?
Yeah. So probably already read it.
I think I was talking to Adam at Hovig's pool once about this, because we were talking about how we got like these, Hovig and I and Adam got our little rubber like toe spacers. And, immediate judgment from our wives because we look like little freaks. But I think Adam was even talking about taping his mouth when he sleeps too.
Yeah, he does.
Yes. So
cold showers. He's all in on all that weird stuff.
Have you ever taped your mouth going to sleep?
I have tried.
It's some of my best nights of sleep, man.
I'd be scared shitless.
I was scared shitless, but it was. I woke up. I'm like,
really?
This was amazing.
Yeah. What do you do with that beard, though?
It sucks pulling the tape.
Yeah.
I have like this surgical tape, and you pull it off, like, it was burnt. Gosh. So I got to give credit where credit is due, because my wife, who's a speech therapist, it was her, and we had this like intellectual debate about breathing efficiency while training, and I immediately went towards, it would be more efficient for you to breathe out of your mouth because you can increase your stroke volume, you can increase your volume going in. And, she kind of sat me back down to earth, and, she went through some coursework on how nasal breathing in high intensity exercising might be more advantageous for parasympathetic modulation, or sympathetic modulation to promote parasympathetics, so you're not spiking your heart rate too high too soon.
That is correct.
But there comes a point where I'm gassed, I'm breathing through my mouth. Right. Well, maybe I should slow down and see if I can see how long I can train while still breathing through my nose.
Yep.
And so I went down the rabbit hole into James Nestor's book, and there was this part where they talk about like a horse, and how a horse, no matter how fast they're running, they always breathe from their nose. They never breathe from their mouth in a sprint. And that just sat me back. I had to reflect on that and think like, all right, let's go back to the drawing board and let's figure out why we have a nose. Why is that advantageous? And then from an evolutionary perspective, how has that impacted our health? Or said another way, how has the absence of nasal breathing affected our health? And that's where James went into this 10-year battle of trying to improve his nasopharyngeal pathways, both surgically and non-surgically, about how he can increase the volume in his nasopharynx to breathe better, and how much that has affected chronic disease. From tongue ties in little children, and how much that's impacted sleep regressions, right? Because if they have a tongue tie, maybe their tongue set back, their jaw's recessed, and now they're no longer nasal breathing, so they're mouth breathing. That's like the gateway into chronic disease as a kid. And, my little girl, we struggled for those first couple of years trying to get into a real good groove with her. And Jen went through this. She picked up that book, and she leads by example. I had to follow in her footsteps. And James Nestor's book really just pointed out a lot of flaws in how we get so caught up in work and if you are more mindful of how often you're truly breathing through your nose, it's not as often as you might think. And, here I am pausing to breathe through my nose right now because I'm catching myself breathing through my mouth as I talk. But it's an incredible read on what this guy's journey was. He went into a study where he plugged his nose for 2 weeks. He was with this other guy. They joined into a study with the sleep physiologist, plugged their nose with, some type of like non-surgical intervention, so they could not breathe out of their nose for 2 weeks straight. They ran blood markers, pre and post, and found out that basically every single marker of disease manifestation was spiking in those 2 weeks. And from EEG monitoring, EKG, to homocysteine, CRP, all the inflammatory markers in their blood work was showing how his chronic disease was spiking by the absence of nasal breathing. And what was remarkable is that when they removed the packing to allow them to breathe nasally, all of those biomarkers for chronic disease were decreasing. And that was that was really eye-opening for me, because that's something that could really empower patients to do. That's like low barrier of entry, not a lot of like equipment. It's not very expensive. It's a $20-something book, and they can understand how much they can affect like vagal tone. Vagus is a cranial nerve in the brainstem that modulates your autonomics. And if you can actually strengthen or massage the vagus nerve and sympathetic nervous system, you can really help modulate your autonomics, which is kind of like at the foundation of a lot of diseases.
So give me an opinion before we wrap this episode up, because we're going to go into the sleep part of it with the inflammation episode, which is going to come up next week, guys. So make sure you get ready for that. But the mouthpiece that a lot of us are wearing at the gym now, I'm wearing one. I know Ramson is another trendsetter with that one, wears a mouthpiece, and it's designed by Airwave, which is, if you read the literature about that mouthpiece and why athletes are wearing it, it really does almost kind of echo what you're saying right now. Have you heard anything about these with mouthpiece? Do you think a general CrossFitter that's just here for fitness, doesn't really care that much about the performance side of it, do you think there is some value in playing around with wearing a mouthpiece? And what do you say to someone, well, it doesn't make a big difference. My time in this workout was still that. Do athletes need to think a little deeper about the long-term positive impact rather than what your WOD score was when you do something like that?
Totally. Yeah. Like you're not here just to WOD 1 week.
Right.
When you come here, you come to Bison, you're committed. This is a long relationship. This is a lifetime relationship. This is a lifetime commitment. And I think that the majority of us are not so narrow-minded or narrow-focused that this relationship and commitment to sport and to fitness and health and longevity and performance, if it's going to benefit you, why do you wear wrist wraps? So I don't miss a week's worth of training because on Murph I ripped off half my calluses.
Yeah, right.
I don't like wrists and belts and lifters. These are all accessories that allow us to lift with good technique, good form, and to spare your joints. If wearing lifters is going to be great to maybe help with tendon adaptation in your patellar and quad tendons and keep your spine more upright, and the Airwave is just going to give you the opportunity to breathe more efficiently so you're not stressing your system so much, why not?
Yeah, right. And that's kind of like what I wanted to get to before we wrap this episode up, is when Hartman goes into this, literature, these books, it is for his own well-being. But like Sam said earlier on, he'll use himself as a guinea pig, and then he'll kind of put this on his patients. And if you're going to be treated by Hartman either now or down the road, I can almost guarantee you that an example would be this book on breathing and how a lot of us do not do it efficiently. Subconsciously, we just don't think about it. When he ever gives you some piece of advice like this, or next week's episode when we start talking about the sleep and the nutrition, it's not just for the quick fix. I think that's one thing I've always respected and admired about getting treatment from Hartman. It's not about fixing you for next week. It's like what he said, it's a lifelong dedication to making your body better. So, any closing thoughts before we wrap this episode up? And don't worry, he is coming back next week, from either Sam or Hartman, just on, where we are heading into next week's episode, and Any thoughts on what he has said, Sam?
Yeah, two things. The first thing is a lot of these principles you may not even know are being touched on with the airwave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even, when I first got it, I didn't even know why I was getting it. Like, I was just like, okay, Rich Froning has it, so I'm going to try it. And then you sort of dive into it, and then you understand some of these principles. I don't know if the airwave is necessary. It can help, just like some of these adjuncts can help. Like, I don't need a weight belt most of the time. In certain cases, I will use it. Same with lifters. Same with the airwave. I don't love the airwave because I tend to go through them a lot, and it seems to be kind of expensive for me to run through all these airwaves. But it can help, especially if you're someone who tends to be a mouth breather. Chris Henshaw talks about breathing. So it's being approached by a lot of different people.
Right.
And so when you talk about it, you don't just take it as what Dr. John Hartman's saying. This is valid science that's coming up, like with the Whoop, with the heart rate variability.
Mm-hmm.
I know you were an aura guy, right?
Yeah.
The parasympathetic sympathetic interaction. Like, I see on the medical side, people are implanting vagal nerve stimulators. Like, that's one of the hottest surgeries right now, for a number of different reasons, not just for like one indication, but like 500 different medical indications. So this is a tidal wave that's coming, if it hasn't already occurred, about parasympathetic, sympathetic interaction, health, and breathing is a big part of it. So there's no doubt that these are, if you as a CrossFitter haven't sort of seen these, you might already be doing some of these things or being touched on with some of the things that you do without even knowing it. But understanding the science behind it might make it better. And that's a really good way of doing it with that book. The second thing is, I also wanted to touch on with Hartman, which I really like about you and I've always known about you, is that as much as you know about the non-surgical treatments, there are also instances, and I'm thinking of one person at our gym, and I won't mention her name, but as soon as there was something that was acute happening, you like took care of her and said, you got to go see someone right away for surgery, like yesterday.
Yeah.
And you also have a cadre of people around you that you trust. So you know, like, this is a non-surgical issue, this is a surgical issue. And I've known providers who feel like they're supermen and they can handle everything. And that's really not the case. A good provider knows what they can handle and then what they shouldn't handle.
Thanks, Sam.
And the people that you have around you. And it was so funny because I remember the first time I met you, you told me, you know, if there's an orthopedic issue, I like this guy. And I was like, dude, that's the same guy that at my hospital, the people in the know, like the people who operate, who are in the OR, they like this, or like, this is the guy that they would go to. And I was like, how do you even know that this was the guy? Like, and not that I'm saying that, like, there are plenty of really good guys who operate, or, you know, surgeons, not guys, but just surgeons. But I feel like you are very good at sort of completing the treatment circle. So it's not just all about you, it's about what resources you have around you, you know, who do you have around you. It's not like you're like, okay, I can't treat this, so go see someone else. No, you're like, you should go see this person. They can be very helpful, and your treatment plan is comprehensive in that regard, and that's the part that I really like as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. My goal is to help build that team, you know, and I'm going to look at that person as if that was my family member, or if that was my loved one. And I really appreciate that. I'm really hyper aware of what I know I can help, and I'm extremely aware of what I know I can't help. And I want to make sure that if I can put that person in the fastest position to get resolution, because as you know, in that case, that there's a couple things that are, you know, relatively life-threatening where there's a window of opportunity. You know, there's certain conditions like that where the clock is ticking. And, you know, unfortunately, I know that realistically, I'm not always the first call. And that person might have gone somewhere else, and maybe the clock's ticking 24, 48 hours. And there are certain conditions like that warrant immediate surgical intervention. And my job is to guide that person towards resolution. I'm not trying to be the hero. I'm trying to be the guide to get the hero to the end goal.
I will say this person that I'm thinking of, and I won't mention her, so grateful. And when you have someone who is like that, that really impressed me a lot, that they were so grateful with how prompt and immediate and correct the identification and the treatment was, and getting them to the right person. That was really cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, so more of the story. Listen to this guy when he talks. All right. John's going to come back with us next week. We're going to talk about something that all of us CrossFitters struggle with at some point. So make sure you come back and hit us up next week. Thanks, John. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to the HeardFit podcast. Be on the lookout for next week's episode.